guitar that will save your ears. So one of the most underrated characteristics of instruments and guitars in particular is intonation. For those that don't know, what is intonation? Well, basically, you want each note on the guitar to be in tune with every other note. And when we're dealing with guitars, it usually has to do with the tuning of the open strings, with the tuning of the strings when you're fretting on the higher notes. And a guitar with bad intonation, you'll get like the high E in tune, and then when you play the E on the 12th fret or even the 24th fret, it won't be in tune. And on a guitar with good intonation, all of the notes, no matter where you play them on the neck, will be in tune with each other. Now, a real giveaway for whether or not a guitar has good or bad intonation is when you're playing bar chords. Because the hand position of the chord will be the same, but just the fret you're playing on is the only thing that's different. And so maybe you're playing a chord down here on the 2nd fret, like a B or something, and then the further you get down the neck, if it gets more out of tune, the guitar's bad intonation, and if it keeps its tuning, okay, as you get further down the neck, that guitar has really good intonation. Now, octaves are also really important when it comes to intonation. You should be able to play something in a lower octave and then move up and play it in a higher octave, and the two octaves should sound in tune. Now, why is intonation important? Well, for one thing, it sounds way better when you're playing an instrument that has good intonation, because you can be playing the correct notes, you can be using the right pressure on the frets and all this stuff, but if the guitar has really bad intonation, it'll sound out of tune, like when you're playing a high part. So number one, it makes you sound much better when the guitar has good intonation. But the other thing is, if you're doing ear training, where you're trying to be able to recognize notes, recognize the intervals between them, and also hear certain pitches, a guitar with bad intonation is going to throw off your own internal intonation. Now, why am I talking about intonation and talking about this guitar, the SC77 from AIO All-in-One Guitars? Well, Jen over at AIO Guitars, I was having a conversation recently with him about intonation. He was telling me a story about how when he first started playing, he had really good pitch, right? Really good ears, basically. He could hear notes. He knew exactly what note that was. He could sing a melody and everything would be in tune. And then he got a different guitar. And he practiced with this other guitar for a couple of years. And then somehow his ears and his pitch got worse. And when he finally figured it all out, the guitar he was practicing with had bad intonation. I mean, think about it. If you are working on your pitch or your ear training, you need a reference that's going to be in tune for that to work. A lot of people use a piano, but if you're a guitar player, obviously you're going to use a guitar. But imagine if the guitar has bad intonation. When you hear the wrong notes, when you hear out of tune notes, that's going to throw off your reference. It's going to screw up your ears. Now, Jen over at AIO, I mean, he brought this up to me as something that he goes out of his way to really focus on. And that is why these guitars have such good dead-on intonation. Now, I've talked before about the extensive setup work that they do on these guitars. And the way they do this is they do the setup before they ship them out to the customer. The customer can even request certain things. And that is important with the intonation, because the intonation can change depending on the gauge of strings or setup adjustments like the action or even the tuning of the guitar, if you're in standard tuning or whole step down or D. So when you're going to do the setup of guitar, you have to know what gauge of strings you're going to be using, the tuning, all that stuff. Otherwise, you could be intonating the guitar for the wrong setup. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about this guitar itself. I've talked about the SC77 before. A few years ago, I think maybe 3 years ago, I reviewed one that was like a beautiful natural finish. This is their tobacco burst finish. It's got this wonderful flame top, and it's got a nice gloss black on the back of the body and on the back of the neck. It's a mahogany body, mahogany neck, set neck of course, 24 3/4 inch scale length, like you would expect to find on a Les Paul style guitar. And we've got Grover tuners. It's got an ebony fretboard, abalone binding around the body and around the headstock here, and abalone inlays on the fretboard. I know also recently they've upgraded these guitars to use full-size pots instead of the mini pots that they were using before. Now, I love the tobacco burst finish, but they do have several other colors. And also this is the AIO SC77, but they also have the WLP guitars, which is very similar. That was based on like the Wolf guitars. That was kind of the earlier guitars that AIO sold, but they have some in that version too, which just kind of has different colors and a slightly different headstock as well. So I'll put links for all this stuff down in the video description below. Also, people are always asking me about the weight of these guitars. It's a full thickness Les Paul style guitar. This one weighed in at 8.6 pounds. And let's not forget, one of the most important features of these guitars is the price. I've talked about AIO so much. One of my favorite things about them is how affordable they are. It's like $450 to $500, right in that price range. So you get a ton of guitar for your money. Okay, now let's plug this in. I'll give you some more samples of what this guitar sounds like. But of course, real quick guys, as always, if you enjoy videos like this, checking out cool new affordable guitars and also staying up on all the latest news in the guitar universe, and you have not already subscribed for some reason, please consider subscribing right now. Okay, let's go ahead and plug this in, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the guitar. Okay guys, so let's talk a little bit more about this. Now real quick, the amp that I used for the demo was the Fender GTX 100. That amp has been out for a while, but it's one of my favorite amps to use for demos. It goes for around $500. Great combo amp. I'll have a link for in the video description below. Now the other thing I want to talk about with this is a question that I get every once in a while, and I have answered this before. I'm just going to put it in here again. Hopefully I can really put this to rest. There was a guy that did a video, I think on the WLP, the Wolf WLP guitar, and in that video he mistakenly said that the inlays on this guitar are done with stickers. That is not true. That is not the case. The confusion is because these are abalone inlays, and the abalone material that gets put in here is very, very thin. And so the inlays themselves is a combination of the abalone material and resin that's used to sort of fill in the rest of the cutout where the inlay is. I think what happened was the guy saw just the abalone material, which is very, very thin, and he mistook it for a sticker. But to be totally clear, guys, these are actual inlays. It's cut out of the fretboard. It's sunken down in there. With the resin material, it's nice and thick and everything, but they are not stickers. Hopefully I can put that to rest. Okay, now the other thing, I love the look of this guitar. I love the binding, the inlays, and the gold hardware, but let's be honest, I kind of like flashy stuff a little bit, and I know not everyone does. AIO also knows that not everyone does, and so lately they've been coming out with some other hardware color combinations that give the guitar a little bit more of a simplified look. As an example, they've got a beautiful gold top Les Paul style guitar with just like a single ply binding. That guitar plays great and looks really classic, a little more simple than this stuff. Now back to the intonation, right? I think one of the best things about having a guitar with great intonation like this is that when people are listening to you, they're watching you play the guitar, they're hearing what is coming out of the amplifier, it sounds so much better when the guitar has good intonation. And it's kind of not really your fault either way if it has bad intonation or good intonation. But somebody listening to it, they don't know that. So if you're playing a guitar that has bad intonation, they just think that you're screwing up. They think you're a bad guitar player because the guitar is a little bit out of tune when you play in certain areas of the fretboard. Most people don't understand, non-musicians don't understand what intonation is. So number one, it's just pleasant to listen to. Number two, it makes your ears better. And number three, it will impress people when you play for them. Now, one last thing here. Obviously, these are great guitars. The intonation is fantastic, but the guitar in general is great. I'm always impressed with the AIO. So these are a great first guitar also. No Floyd Rose to mess around with anything. But let's say you already have a guitar, like your first guitar, okay? It's really worth considering checking the intonation. And if you don't know how to do it, find somebody that does know how to check the intonation and see if it needs to be reset and adjusted. If you right now are playing a guitar and practicing with a guitar with bad intonation, you're really setting yourself up for failure in the future when it comes to bending and playing in tune and your ear training as well. Like I said in the beginning of the video, intonation I think is a really underrated characteristic of a guitar, and it really is important that it's right. Okay guys, so I hope you enjoyed that video. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If there's any experienced guitar players out there, let me know what is the worst intonation you ever had on a guitar. I'd love to hear about it. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thumbs up if you did, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll talk to you very soon.